So maybe I can start. New Vrindavan's only cow was a black and white crossbreed named Kalia. Um, and Prabhupada would drink a little of her milk morning, noon, and night. I haven't tasted milk like this in 65 years, he said. One day he predicted New Vrindavan would have many cows and their udders would be so full that the dripping milk would muddy the pastures. All the people in the West were blind to their great sin of cow slaughter and its grievous karmic reactions. He said New Vrindavan would demonstrate to the world the social, moral, and economic advantages of protecting the cow and utilizing her milk rather than killing her and eating her flesh. Prabhupada wanted um, Prabhupada wanted the New Vrindavan devotees to build cottages. He wanted many buildings, even if at first they were primitive. And he gave a plan for a simple structure of baked mud. He also wanted a Krishna conscious school, and the country, he said, would be the best place for it. The city is made by man, and the country is made by God. So Prabhupada said, paraphrasing the British poet Cowper, the young students should learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and at the same time, they should become pure devotees. In their play, they could imitate the pastimes of Krishna and his cowherd boyfriends, with one child massaging Krishna, another wrestling with Krishna, just as in the spiritual world. The woman in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, should care for the children, clean the temple, cook for the deities, and churn butter. He had many plans for the new Vrindavan, and he was giving only idea seeds with few details. You develop it to your heart's content, he told Kirtananda Swami. An ideal Vedic community with the members producing all their own food and necessities was what Prabhupada wanted. Unless the devotees at New Vrindavan could become self-sufficient, he said, there was no use in in their occupying such a big piece of land. Even before Prabhupada's visit to New Vrindavan, he had requested Kirtananda Swami and Hayagriva to plan for 7 temples on the property. These 7 temples should be named after the major temples of old Vrindavan: Madan Mohan, Gobindji, Gopinath, Radha Damodar, Radha Raman, Syam Sundar, and Radha Gokulananda. Prabhupada said he would personally secure Radha Krishna deities for each temple. Oh wow, that's interesting. It was inevitable that Prabhupada leave New Vrindavan. Um, Letters from London, Los Angeles, and San Francisco compelled him to travel. On the day of his departure, the New Vrindavan devotees teased him, saying, saying he couldn't go. Kirtananda Swami went so far as to say they would block his way on the road. But Prabhupada corrected him, you can do that to the spiritual master. Accompanied by Kirtananda Swami and the New Vrindavan devotees, Prabhupada walked along the forest path. The New Vrindavan countryside was verdant, the summer air hot and moist. Prabhupada was silent. He had come here to encourage his disciples, and he himself had also become encouraged. Here was simple village life as Krishna himself had lived it, depending on the land and the cow. That cow, Kalia, had given such nice milk. The New Vrindavan's cow were not ordinary. They knew they would not be killed. So far, only a few devotees were here, but by Krishna's grace, work, more would come. Interesting thing. This is coming up. So now Prabhupada is in New Vrindavan, right? New Vrindavan, new place, new farm, 120 acre, acquired, and um, and he went there. He liked very much. Now he's giving how this new Vrindavan should be developed. It should be similar, exactly similar to oh, Vrindavan in India. They're non-different, and you develop like this, like Vrindavan. Simple. What the children should do, what they should study. You know. So um, create simple structure, baked mud school, Krishna conscious school, and um, to plan the city. The city is made by the plan, and the country is made by God. Opposite. Um, so now he had a whole plan in having the school so children can grow. The ladies can take up the temple and eat and all these things. He had many plans, he told. An ideal Vedic community with the members producing all their own food and necessities was what Prabhupada wanted. Then his point is unless you use it self-sufficient, there is no use in their occupying such a big piece of land. One thing is, um, I think this is the first farm project, right? This is the first farm project in Prabhupada acquired so far. They say cows and everything is coming up. Um, he had many plans to develop, but he received so many letters. He also told devotees to build 7 temples, and I will personally, um, what he says, I'll personally acquire, secure Radha Krishna deities for each temple. There are a lot of things going on, and considering this subject matter in the management. The devotees want that, okay, Prabhupada said you should build the temples. Now other devotees were managing, so they say that no, maybe in future, not now, because we need to maintain what we have. This way, you see, always there's a discussion going on. If Prabhupada would have been there, he would have said, okay, you go to this hill mountain, you build that like that, would have been done. Anyway, so Prabhupada had to leave because devotees from different areas writing letters, to update. And devotees didn't wanted to leave him. They were saying, you cannot go. Kirtan, they say, I will block your own way. It's a love, it's so much of love for, as I give some water. It's so much of love for Prabhupada. This is spiritual master and disciples has that kind of relationship. So, accompanied by Kirtan and Swami, Prabhupada walked in his heart. And Prabhupada is remembering the place, the Kalia's milk. And he says that the new Vrindavan's cows are not ordinary because they're not going to be killed. Anyway, I will let AJ you read, please.
Sure. Prabhupada, I caught whatever you got. Prabhupada and Kirtananda Swami walked together along the forest path, saying little, but their mutual understanding was deep. Prabhupada hadn't given many specific instructions, a few words while sitting or walking together outdoors, a gesture, a facial expression of pleasure or concern. Kirtananda Swami could understand, however, that New Vrindavan was very dear to his spiritual master and should become dear to him also. Prabhupada assured him that because the devotees of New Vrindavan were centered on chanting Hare Krishna, serving the deities, and protecting the cows, Krishna would bless them with success. The community was already successful, and Krishna would continue to protect the devotees against all impediments and difficulties. At the end of the 2-mile walk, Prabhupada, surrounded by his followers, stood beside the car that was to take him to the airport in Pittsburgh. From there, he would fly to Los Angeles. His suitcases, which had come out on a horse-drawn cart, were loaded into the car's luggage compartment, and Prabhupada got in the back seat. Amid cries of Hare Krishna and Prabhupada, the car pulled out onto the country highway, and Prabhupada continued chanting Hare Krishna on his beads. Prabhupada had been hearing regularly from his six disciples in London. Having little money and living as separate couples in different parts of the city, they found their greatest inspiration in Prabhupada's letters. They would also repeatedly read his instructions and dream of when he would one day visit them in London. Although in San Francisco, Krishna consciousness had been fun for the three couples, in England it was becoming more and more difficult. The devotees, being foreigners, were not allowed to earn a salary, and except for a few contacts, they knew no one. Although unable to live together, they were trying to maintain their morale in Krishna consciousness. Yamuna. I had to move to a Jamaican ghetto, the top floor of one of the buildings. It was awful. Day after day after day after day after day, I would sit and listen to a tape of Prabhupada singing. It was a beautiful tape he had just done in Los Angeles, and I would pray to him, please come, please come. Makunda. Letters. That's what kept us alive. Prabhupada would write and say, I am coming. 2 or 3 times he wrote to say, I am coming by March. And we would write back and say we wanted to get a place first. We really felt it wouldn't be right for him to come unless we had a place first. He wrote a letter to my wife. I was planning to come by March, but your husband is not allowing me. What can I do? So at the beginning, it's Kirtananda is realizing how important New Vrindavan is to Prabhupada, and it says, you know what, since this is important to Prabhupada, it should be important to me as well. And it kind of talks about how they were getting ready to leave and what they were doing, and how how the community was already successful because they were chanting Hare Krishna, they were serving the deities and protecting cows. And because of that, Krishna would continue to protect the devotees against all impediments and difficulties, which kind of goes right along with the talk you gave today, Krishna, about, as long as you're chanting and listening, no bad elements can get to you. So at the end of the walk, then, it was time for Prabhupada to leave to Pittsburgh, and the devotees were crying out and singing and chanting, and Prabhupada hit the road to head out to Pittsburgh so he could move out to LA. And then it goes on to talk about the six disciples that had moved to London, and just some of the problems they were having, and how the only thing that kind of kept them going was letters from Prabhupada saying, hey, I'm going to be there. I'm going to come see you soon. And Yamuna talks about living in what sounds like to be less than a great building. And Yamuna would just sit and listen to a tape of Prabhupada and just saying, please come to London already. And Mukunda as well. Prabhupada would tell him he's coming, and Mukunda would say, no, don't come yet. It doesn't make sense for you to come if we don't have a place yet. And then, and after that, Prabhupada ratted him out and told his wife and said, hey, I wanted to come, but your husband said no. He said, I'm not allowed. What do you want me to do?
What can I do? That's funny. Right. Okay. Nipa, you can read, please.
Hare Krishna. The devotees in London had not seen Prabhupada in 4 months, and still there was no date set for his visit. Although they sometimes became discouraged and talked of going back to America, they persevered. Prabhupada had promised he would come when they got a temple, and that promise helped them remember that they were personally serving him. They felt that he was doing the work and they were his assistants. His absence was only external. By his instructions, whether written, spoken, or remembered in the heart, he was always with them. He was constantly directing them. While trying out various schemes to popularize Krishna consciousness in London, Shyama Sundara arranged for a program to which he invited many of London's prominent citizens. About 100 people responded to Shyamasundar's formal invitation. One member of parliament, a few government officials, but mostly young people. The devotees served a feast and showed a film of Sri Prabhupada walking by Stove Lake in Golden Gate Park. Prabhupada had sent a tape recording specifically for the evening, and the devotees highlighted it as the evening special attraction, even though they hadn't had time to hear it in advance. Gurudasa started the tape, and suddenly there was Prabhupada's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please accept my greetings in the happy year of 1969 and blessings of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for your kindly participating in this happy meeting of Krishna consciousness. Although Prabhupada had recorded the tape in the quiet of his room in Los Angeles, the devotees were astonished to feel Prabhupada's direct presence, preaching Krishna consciousness to the English. Lord Chaitanya informed us that the absolute secret supreme personality of Godhead can descend in transcendental sound, vibration, and thus when we chant Hare Krishna mantra offenselessly, we immediately contact Krishna and his internal energy. Thus we become immediately purified from all dirty things in our heart. The guests sat listening politely as Prabhupada described the soul's travel of transmigrating from body to body, and the path of the soul's liberation through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna consciousness was transcendently colorful and full of transcendental pleasure. Chanting could be done anywhere on the street, in the park, or at home. Prabhupada concluded his talk. So the devotees in London had not seen Prabhupada in almost 4 months, and there was no date set for Prabhupada's visit also. So sometimes they were discouraged and talked of going to America, but they um, persevered. Prabhupada promised that when they got a temple, had promised he would come when they had got the temple, and his absence was like external. That's what he's trying to explain here. By his instructions, whether it is verbal, spoken, written, he's always there. That's what he's conveying. While trying to out various schemes to popularize Krishna consciousness in London, Shyam Sundara also arranged for a program where he invited London's prominent citizens like the member of the parliament, a few government officials, but mostly young people. The devotees served a feast and showed a film of Srila Prabhupada walking by the Stove Lake in Golden Gate Park. Prabhupada had sent a tape for them to hear, and it was recorded. It highlighted evening special attraction. It was like a special attraction in the evening. And when the tape started, they could hear Prabhupada saying, "Ladies," like a welcome speech, ladies and gentlemen. And he's like, though Prabhupada had recorded the tape in Los Angeles in a quiet room, but his presence was felt like as if he was there in front of them. And then it says about Lord Chaitanya informed that absolute supreme personality of Godhead is transcendental sound vibration, and we should chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and the guests were listening politely as Prabhupada described the soul's travel of transmigrating from body to body and the liberation and chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And he also said about transcendentally colorful and full of transcendental presence was there. Chanting could be done anywhere, he said. It could be street, park, home, and this is how he concluded his talk.
Thank you. Shyamala, you can. Yeah, Shyamala Devi.
but to assemble and sit together. We require a place for congregation. Therefore, a temple of the Krishna conscious movement is required to be established in various centers in the world, irrespective of the particular country's culture, philosophy, and religion. Krishna consciousness is so universal and perfect that it can appeal to everyone, irrespective of his position. Therefore, I fervently appeal to you all present in this meeting to extend your cooperation for successful execution of this great movement. Thanking you once more. There was a pause, and then Prabhupada began playing the harmonium and singing Hare Krishna. Afterward, he again spoke. My disciples in London have very eagerly asked me to visit there, and I am also very anxious to see you all. So as soon as there is an opportunity, I shall go with my Sankirtan party, who are now engaged in Los Angeles. And that will be a great pleasure for you all to meet together. That is all. Only a few weeks after this meeting, the group received their first important publicity. A photo of the 6 devotees and little Saraswati appeared with an article by the famous columnist Atticus in the Sunday Times. Gurudas was quoted as saying, Hare Krishna is a chant which sets God dancing on your tongue. Try chanting Queen Elizabeth and see the difference. The article described the missionary group from America as very gentle people, a bit unworldly, but not at all ingenuous. Citing their renunciation of illicit sex and intoxication, the article commented, Tame your might think, but they look very well on it. And what is likely to earn them a public is their chanting. Within a few days, the same article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, but with a new headline, Krishna Chants Startle London. Prabhupada was pleased when he saw the headline. Indeed, his Grihastha disciple had succeeded where his sannyasi godbrothers had failed. Although several of Prabhupada's scholarly godbrothers had lectured around England over the last 35 years, only one person, an elderly English lady named Elizabeth Bottle, had shown interest.
Thank you. So now here the point is, it's interesting how Prabhupada recorded everything as if like he's speaking in front of them. Now his father continues in his talk, right? But to assemble to sit, we require a place for congregation. Therefore, temple of Krishna conscious movement is required to establish irrespective of whatever the culture one is, but we need a temple. So this is a universal. It's not a sectarian, irrespective of his position. Therefore, he's appealing to everybody and to extend your cooperation for successful execution of this great movement. Thanking. Interesting. They did the program, but it's audio recording. Looks like. I'm sure they may have done some kirtan and all these things. Then again, he played the harmonium, and then further he gave it. My disciples are here, very eagerly asked to visit there, but I'm anxious to see you all actually. Like a personal message he's sending. He's speaking in the audio video. So I'll come with my Sankirtan team from LA. They're waiting. Interestingly, after a few weeks, this now it got publicity. Even Saraswati is also in the picture. It came on Sunday Times, and then it came in some good things. San Francisco Chronicle also showed that. Right, within a few days, the same article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle. Hare Krishna chant started London. That's interesting, actually. So a lot of publicity. Prabhupada is happy that the sannyasi godbrothers could not do, but these simple householders really could influence and really could do something substantial there. Okay, Prasanti.
Yamuna had written Prabhupada to find out if they should visit Mrs. Boughton. She had received the name Vinoda Vani Dasi, and Prabhupada had replied, the history of this Vani Dasi is that she is an old lady and has a house and has hung a sign, Gaudiya Mat, but that is all. If they liked, Prabhupada had said, they could pay her a courtesy call and see if she would let them use her place for kirtanas. One of the men had gone to see her at her home, several hours out of the city, but from behind her closed door she had refused to meet with him unless he bought an introductory letter from the Gaudiya Mutt in New Delhi. Vinoda Vanidasi was the fruit of 35 years of sannyasis preaching in England, whereas in 4 months Prabhupada's young American missionaries were startling London. After months of living scattered throughout the city, the devotees met a landlord who allowed them to stay together rent-free in the vacant warehouse at Covent Garden. The devotees improvised a temporary temple and soon recruited their first 3 British devotees. The newcomers at once took to full Krishna conscious regime, including the dhoti and shaved head, and loved it. The devotees, thrilled to see their new group expanding and Prabhupada's potency working, decided to phone Prabhupada from their landlord's office. The telephone was a conference phone, and Prabhupada's voice came over the little loudspeaker on the desk. The devotees sat around the desk, listening tensely. Prabhupada, Mukunda said, "We have some new brahmacharis here." "Oh, are they cooking chapatis?" Prabhupada asked from across the ocean. The devotees laughed uncontrollably, then hushed to hear more. "No," said Mukunda, "but they will be now." The devotees each told Prabhupada how they missed him, and he said he missed them too and would come as soon as they could get a place. So Emuna has written a letter to Prabhupada asking his permission to visit Mrs. Bautal, who is Vinoda Vani Dasi, and she was also in Krishna conscious movement. So Prabhupada gave some history of Vani Dasi, that she's an old lady who has a house over there, and she is from Gaudiya Mutt, and she also has a sign over there at the house. And the devotees went to see her, drove several hours to her place, and then she asked for an introductory letter, and then only she can talk to them. She is considered as the fruit of Gaudiya Mutt after 35 years of sannyasi preachings in England, but Prabhupada's young disciples were only there for 4 months and they were already startling London. After living for several months at different places, they finally found a vacant warehouse at Covent Garden, and the landlord allowed them to stay rent-free. Soon, 3 brahmacharis also joined them, and they took the dhoti kurta and also shaved head and started the full Krishna conscious regime. And they also informed the same to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was asking if the new brahmacharis are cooking chapatis. And the devotees told Prabhupada how they missed him and how they wanted to see him. And Prabhupada promised them that he would be visiting as soon as they get a place.
Prabhupada joking. Oh, are they cooking chapatis? That's everybody's laughing actually. Nice. Sridhari or Srikar?
After allowing the devotees 3 months in a warehouse at Covent Garden, the landlord announced that he needed to use the space and the devotees would have to move. The couples moved to 3 separate locations, and again their strong group spirit dissipated. Prabhupada began sending 2 or 3 letters a week to the scattered couples, praising them for their sincere determination. The devotees would gather regularly, if only to show one another their latest letters. Prabhupada wrote to Mukunda of his desire to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, specifically London. So far as I am concerned, I always wish only to expedite my mission of life to spread Krishna consciousness in the western part of the world. I am still firmly convinced that if I can establish this movement through the help of all the boys and girls who have not joined with me, then it will be a great achievement. I am an old man, and there has already been warnings, but before I leave this body, I wish to see some of you very strong in the Krishna consciousness understanding. I am very glad and proud also that you six boys and girls, although you have not been able to establish a nice center in London, still you have done your best. And the news has reached far away in India that my disciples are doing very nice work in Krishna consciousness. So that is my pride. I have received a letter from my god brother informing me that it has been advertised in India that in Vietnam also somebody is spreading Hare Krishna movement. So there is no need to be disappointed. You go on with your work as best as Krishna gives you the opportunity, and there is no cause of your anxiety. Everything is going smoothly. But since you are now separated, the strength of your activities appears to be little disturbed. Now you try to assemble together in the same spirit as you were doing, and in that case, temple or no temple, your movement will go on progressively. We are not much concerned about the temple because temple worship is not primary factor in this age. Primary factor is Sankirtan. But sometimes we want a center where people may gather and see. So a temple is required secondarily. So try your best immediately to live together. I am very much eager to see that you are again living together. So the landlord, after allowing the devotees to stay there for 3 months at the Covent Garden, he informed them that he needed that space to use it for something else. So the couple had to move, and then all three couples they moved to three separate locations. And then Srila Prabhupada now started sending letters to all these three couples, praising them for their sincere determinations. So all these devotees they would gather regularly, and then they would inspire each other, and then share the letters, whatever instructions they received from Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada wrote to Mukunda of his desire to preach Krishna consciousness, and then specifically in London. So in the letter, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that he's like very much firmly convinced that if he can establish this movement with the help of all his disciples, all the boys and girls, then it will be a great achievement. And then he wanted to do it as soon as possible before he leaves the material world. So Prabhupada says he's already an old man, and then there has already been many warnings in the past. So before he departed from this world, he wanted to see all his disciples, at least some of his disciples, to be very much strongly fixed in Krishna consciousness. And then he mentions that he's very proud that all these six boys and girls, although they did not establish a very big center in London, still they have done their best. And then the news of their preaching already reached India. And then there many of Srila Prabhupada's converters were talking that Srila Prabhupada's disciples are doing very nice work in Krishna consciousness. So he says Srila Prabhupada says that is his pride. And then Prabhupada also mentions in the letter to Mukunda that he received a letter from his god brother, and then his god brother informed Prabhupada that there is already some kind of preaching going on in Vietnam. So Prabhupada encourages them to go on with their work in preaching Krishna consciousness. So he says Krishna is giving so much opportunity, and there is no cause of any anxiety or distress. So things are going smoothly. And then Srila Prabhupada says again that since now they are separated, the strength of their activities may appear to be little disturbed. But again, Prabhupada mentions if they again try to assemble in the same spirit as they were doing in the past, then in that case, if there is a temple or no temple, that does not matter. The movement will still go on progressively. And then Prabhupada mentions that there's not much concern that there is no temple because deity worship is not the primary or factor in this age. So the Yuga Dharma or the primary factor in this age of Kali is Sankirtan. But a temple is required just that people can gather and see and then take darshan of the Lord. So Prabhupada encourages them to try their best immediately to live together. So and then he says he's like very much eager to see that they all come together and then practice again.
Nice. Thank you. Shyam Sundar Prabhu writes, that while they are struggling to make a temple here in the other book, Prabhupada already expanded more temples actually in the US and other places. Parallel, other things are going on a lot. And while the devotees are struggling in London. Seeker, Sridhari,
Oh, it's only me, Prabhu.
it's only you. Okay, good. Mm, who is that? Second, you ready to read?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah.
For Srila Prabhupada's disciples, his instruction that they preach in London was much more binding than any other obligation. He was in their hearts, and they thought of him constantly. In carrying out his orders and trying to please him, they were constrained not by force or law, but by love. To please the spiritual master is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And for Prabhupada's sincere disciples, to please him seemed the end in itself. Los Angeles, June 23, 1969. After leaving New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada visited his center in Los Angeles, where he installed deities of Radha and Krishna. Although, as he had told his disciples in London, the primary factor was Sankirtan, deity worship was also necessary. In his writings, Prabhupada had discussed the need for deity worship, and he had gradually introduced higher and higher standards of deity worship in each of his ISKCON centers. Los Angeles, having become the model ISKCON center, was the natural place for him to introduce a more opulent and demanding standard for worshipping Radha and Krishna. While more than 100 devotees and guests sat in the spacious hall, Prabhupada bathed and dressed the little forms of Radha and Krishna and then placed them on the altar. He was inviting Radha and Krishna to descend to give his disciples the opportunity to serve them. He was offering his disciples Radha and Krishna with faith that his disciples would not neglect them. If the devotees somehow lost their enthusiasm, Prabhupada explained in his lecture, then the worship would become like idol worship. If there is no life, then it is idol worship. Where there is life feeling, then you think, where is Krishna? Here is Krishna. Oh, I have to serve him. I have to dress him. I have to serve Radharani. She is here. Oh, I just have to do it very nicely and as far as possible, decorate her to the best capacity. If you think like this, then you are Krishna conscious. But if you think that it is a brass made doll or idol, then Krishna will reciprocate with you accordingly. If you think that this is a brass made idol, then it will remain brass made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this very Krishna will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you. So here, basically, it tells the mood of Srila Prabhupada's disciples in London who were there preaching that it was not that they were constrained by force or by law, but they had this intense desire to please the spiritual master. So in carrying out his orders, so they were taking and they were doing taking all the difficulties to please the spiritual master. And if you please the spiritual master, here Prabhupada says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased. And for Prabhupada's disciples, that was the goal. And after returning from New Vrindavan, Prabhupada is gone to Los Angeles to install the deities of Radha and Krishna. And here he was focusing on deity worship. ISKCON Center in Los Angeles had become like the model ISKCON Center, and Prabhupada wanted to take that as an opportunity to introduce a more opulent deity worship for Radha and Krishna. So Prabhupada bathed and dressed the forms of Radha and Krishna. He placed them on the altar. Then he offered prayers to invite Radha and Krishna to descend and to give his disciples an opportunity to serve them. And Prabhupada also explains here that if you don't, if you neglect the deities, then the worship is going to become like idol worship. So here he gives the example of like differentiates between idol worship and deity worship. If you think there is no life, then it is idol worship. And if you think there is life, then it is Lord Krishna or Radharani themselves. Then it is deity worship. You have to have that reciprocation, that you're actually taking personal care of Lord Krishna and Radharani. Then Lord Krishna will reciprocate accordingly. If we treat it as a brass made idol, then it will always be a brass made idol. But if you perform your devotion, and you go into a higher platform, then the same Krishna will reciprocate, and he will talk to you.
Isn't it nice? Is it educational so much? How we treat, how we serve. And you remember, AJ? That's why this is the one I want to tell. When Prabhupada came, and the landlord let people go. You remember all the devotees? We say what he would have done. The same LA came up as a standard temple. And it's really nice. I heard a lot about LA temple. It came up very good. Till now, LA temple has a very good name actually. The devotees. I never been, maybe someday you all can go. You all can visit also different temples to learn different services. Okay. With each visit to each center, Prabhupada gave the devotees more service, deepening their commitment to Krishna. All the various services were actually the spiritual master's responsibility, he said. And when a disciple cleaned the temple or performed any service, he did so as the spiritual master's assistant. And any job done improperly was the spiritual master's anxiety. If the devotees whimsically changed the deity worship or neglected the temple, then Prabhupada, more than any disciple, would feel distress. Whenever Prabhupada saw a disciple eager to take on more of the anxiety of preaching Krishna consciousness, he would assign that devotee greater responsibility. Anxiety for serving Krishna, Prabhupada said, was the greatest satisfaction. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur had stated, the trouble I encounter in your devotional service, I will consider the greatest happiness. Satisfaction of the devotees, Prabhupada explained, lay in pleasing the previous spiritual masters, and that was best accomplished by preaching to the fallen souls. To the degree that the devotees carried out that order, they would satisfy their spiritual master and subsequently feel satisfaction themselves. Prabhupada gave the example of Krishna and the gopis. When the gopis pleased Krishna in the rasa dance, Krishna smiled, and when the gopis saw Krishna smile, their happiness and beauty increased 1,000,000 times. When Krishna saw the newly increased beauty of the gopis, he became more pleased, and thus the happiness and beauty of the gopis increased even more. This loving competition increased on and on unlimitedly. This is a great statement we will go through. So now, I just read, okay. So here, Prabhupada, here it says that each center, Prabhupada visits, he gave, he actually, kind of boiling milk. Boiling milk is, now we have devotees, you need to train them. It's not like you just hang and that's it for years. No, you're doing something, now you're showing more interest, now you should get more responsibility. And he very, very interesting point is deepening their commitment to Krishna. Now, all the services we are doing are actually the spiritual master's responsibility. And we all do on behalf of the spiritual master. We are assistants to spiritual master. We are not the doer. We are simply serving on behalf of. So any job done improperly was spiritual master's anxiety. And he wanted that one should not whimsically change the deity worship or neglect the temple. There are a lot of response. To do everything, there has to be a desire, and there has to be heart has to be there. Otherwise, it's not going to. Otherwise, what will happen? one will find as a burden. It's not like Hindu, some of the Hindu will just bring a deity and keep it there. No, this is a really Krishna we are inviting, and we provide this genuine and loving service sincerely, loving aspect. So when he sees devotees are taking more anxiety, eager to take more anxiety for preaching Krishna consciousness, he would assign the devotees more responsibility. Now, anxiety for serving Krishna, Prabhupada is the greatest satisfaction. Quoting Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, no, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says actually, the trouble I encounter in your devotional service, I will consider the greatest happiness. Otherwise, how these disciples knew, they went to all these places and took the risk. I mean, unbelievable. Especially New Vrindavan, the Palace of Gold, all these things in a very short period. They were literally gave their whole life, heart into it. So satisfaction of for the devotee is lay in pleasing the previous spiritual masters, and that was best accomplished by preaching to the fallen souls. So to the degree the devotees carried out that order, they would satisfy the spiritual master and subsequently feel satisfaction themselves. It's not just, Krishna is satisfied, not just spiritual master is satisfied. We are part of the whole thing. Automatically the satisfaction will come to our heart. That's the Bhagavatam's statement. So he gave an example how it goes is that, when gopis were serving Krishna, in Rasa dance, and when they saw this, they were trying to please Krishna actually. When they saw Krishna is very pleased, and they were very pleased. And when they were pleased by Krishna, when they saw gopis, Krishna also became pleased. When they saw Krishna is pleased, again gopis become more pleased. So like in spiritual activity, it's like a competition, ever increasing, anandam buddhivardhanam, more and more. It's a loving competition, increase on and on, unlimitedly. Hope one day we will be able to experience that mode of service in Delaware. AJ? You can
Even in dealings between spiritual master and disciple, a sense of loving competition prevailed, each wanting to serve the other, neither seeking service for himself. Prabhupada was increasing the duties and responsibilities in each of his ISKCON centers, and sincere disciples were coming forward to accept these responsibilities. Thus, everyone was feeling satisfaction. This was pure devotional service, to be free from all material desires and to serve Krishna as directed by the spiritual master in the scriptures. When Prabhupada said that his disciples would become happy by serving Krishna, he spoke from his own deep realization of that ecstasy. Whenever he installed a deity in one of the temples, his ecstasy was greater than that of any of his disciples. At the Ratha Yatra festivals in Golden Gate Park or any public preaching function, he was the most enlivened. He, more than any of his disciples, wanted the public to come and chant and dance in the temple and see the deity of Krishna. And when they did, he was the most pleased. And if a disciple fell away, Prabhupada was the most displeased. Nor was Prabhupada aloof from the details of temple management, the cost of things, how the devotees were being received in public, how each disciple was advancing. Although his disciples saw him as the most exalted Vaishnava and intimate associate of Lord Krishna, they knew he was always available to guide them in their services. He was their leader, but he was with them. He was far above them, but he remained close to them. Only rarely did he leave them behind, as at the Los Angeles deity installation, when he began to cry, speaking directly to Krishna. Krishna, I am most rotten and fallen, but I have brought this thing for you. Please take it. Except for such rare moments, Prabhupada's disciples saw him preaching and serving along with them. So, the first paragraph here, he talks about how there was a sense of competition between the disciples, but in a good way. They all wanted to serve each other, and everybody wanted to take on as much as they could. And Prabhupada seeing that just kept increasing the responsibilities and the duties at the centers, and he was, as he said in previous chapters, he just needs to find, as long as he finds sincere souls, right, that he can, we can accomplish these things. And those sincere disciples just kept coming forward and taking on these responsibilities. After that, they just go into show just how Prabhupada possessed all the qualities that you would look for in a great leader too. You know what I mean? Just, like at first it talks about just his ecstasy of, when, and that he felt from serving Krishna. He led by example. While the disciples were happy serving Krishna, he was in this deep mode of ecstasy as a result of it. And in the last paragraph there, again, it talks about just everything you'd want to see. He was there to guide them, but he also, was there to help as well, and to, he did his part, and he was, he knew the details of the things that were going on, how things were going, who was coming, who was going, make sure the finances were in line. But I like that the last part though, where he says, I'm this guy that they hold, that all the disciples hold in such regard. He himself, I am most rotten and fallen, right? The devotees view him as top, yet he views himself as the worst, so it's an interesting,
That's the symptom
humility.
of the symptom of a pure devotee. Actually, he never thinks he's good. Yeah, thank you for pointing out that. Nice. And he says that, Krishna, I'm more rotten for I have brought this thing for you. Please take it. So he won't express. That's the thing. He won't express his ecstasies, all the time. That's what devotees are observing. Okay, Nipa, you can read, please.
San Francisco, July 25th, 1969. The day before Rath Yatra festival, Prabhupada arrived at San Francisco airport, where a crowd of 50 chanting devotees greeted him. Reporters stepped forward with what to them was an important, relevant question. Swami, what is your opinion on the recent manned US moon landing? Shall I flatter you or tell the truth? Prabhupada asked. The truth, they said. It is a waste of time because it does not benefit you if you cannot live there. The time could have been being better spent in Krishna consciousness. We must go through this universe to the spiritual sky, which is eternal beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. The San Francisco Chronicle printed a picture and story, Ecstasy in Concourse B. On the day of Rath Yatra parade, 100 devotees and a crowd of 1,000 gathered on Haight Street before the tall cart. The deities of Jagannatha, Subhadra, and Balram from the elevated platform within the cart smiled down upon the crowd. A group of devotee musicians seated themselves within the cart made last-minute checks of their loudspeaker system and began kirtana. In the center of the cart, just beneath the deity platform, a red upholstered Vyasana awaited Prabhupada's arrival. As Prabhupada's car approached, he could hear the cries of the devotees, and as he stepped from the car, he saw them all bow down in obeisances. Folding his hands and smiling, he acknowledged his enthusiastic disciples, and he looked around with pleasure at the large crowd that had already gathered. Turning towards the crowd, he beheld the deities on their throne, the same deities who had inaugurated Rath Yatra in America 2 years before. They were beautifully dressed and garlanded, and multicolored pennants and their thick garlands of carnations decorated their car. Rath Yatra was becoming more wonderful each year. Prabhupada bowed down before Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balaram, and his disciples all bowed with him. So here in San Francisco, July 25th, 1969, a day before Rath Yatra, Prabhupada arrived San Francisco airport where there was a crowd and the reporter stepped forward to ask him about the question about a man landing on the US moon. And shall I flatter you or tell the truth? That is what Prabhupada asked them. And they said the truth. And according to Prabhupada, it was a waste of time, because if you don't benefit, it does not benefit you if you cannot live there. You better spend your time in Krishna consciousness. That's what he explained. We must go beyond this universe to the spiritual sky, which is eternal beyond.
Isn't it a common sense, So much money, so much of efforts are being wasted till now. Going to Mars, going to Moon, going to this. I don't know what they're trying to achieve actually. Competition. Yeah,
But
go ahead.
I have seen it's a whole different kind of world, like who people who are into galaxy and time travels and black hole and like
What benefit it brings to the mankind?
maybe they are just getting a backup.
It's just yesterday I was looking into a video. Is there's a competition of building a skyscraper building? Which country had the tallest building? That itself is just one kind of pride. Well, how it's going to benefit to bring you tallest buildings. Similarly, okay, you go to space, you got something, you're doing something, satellites, but going to other planet, trying to go, no one can go. You can go there, but you cannot bring anything. Neither a couple of people go after spending so much of money and efforts. So you cannot go. First of all, you cannot go any. Today only someone was saying, all the, the government has kind of holded all the H1 workers. Something happened, right? So well, every country is under the jurisdiction of some person. You cannot just drop in somewhere and get out of it anytime just like that. It's all waste of time. Prabhupada, even if there's a truth, there's no truth of going to moon, first of all. Even if there is truth, what is the benefit? Is that worth? It doesn't bring any good to people.
And that's what he's saying. Like we must go beyond this universe to the spiritual
Yeah.
sky,
Yes.
beyond birth, death, old age. And the San Francisco Chronicle printed a picture and story saying ecstasy in Concourse Bay. So on the day of Rath Yatra parade, many devotees, a crowd of 1,000 gathered on Haight Street before the toll cart, and the deities of Jagannatha, Subhadra, and Balaram was there, elevated platform within the cart, and they smiled down upon the crowd. A group of devotees, musicians seated themselves within the cart, and they began the kirtana. In the center of the cart, beneath the deity, a red holstered Vyasna awaited Prabhupada's arrival. As Prabhupada's car approached, they could hear the cries of devotees, and they stepped from the car. They saw them bow down in obeisances, folding hands and smiling. He acknowledged the enthusiastic disciples, and they were like turning towards the cart. Beheld the devotees, and they were beautifully dressed and garlanded. So it's saying like the Rath Yatra was becoming more and more wonderful each year, and Prabhupada bowed down to Jagannatha, Subhadra, Balaram, and the disciples did the same thing.
Yes, maybe one more person. Prasant, you can read.
As Prabhupada took his seat on the cart, the Kirtana began again, and the cart, pulled with two long ropes by dozens of men and women, slowly began to move forward. Buckets of burning frankincense poured aromatic clouds through the deities platform above Prabhupada's head. As slowly the cart moved along the road to the park. How many people are behind us? Prabhupada asked, turning to Tamala Krishna, who rode beside him on the cart and had been leading the Kirtana. Tamala Krishna climbed back and surveyed the crowds as far as he could see. 5,000. Sing Jaya Jagannatha, Prabhupada said, and Tamal Krishna then changed the chant from Hare Krishna to Jai Jagannatha, Jai Jagannatha. Throughout the parade, Prabhupada sat serenely watching, his right hand in his bead bag. The large crowd consisted mostly of young hippies, but also included businessmen dressed in suits and ties, elderly people with their grandchildren and families, and a few stray dogs, a mixed Sunday crowd. Suddenly, devotees in front began shouting, "Stop the cart! Stop the cart!" Ahead, the low arch of a park bridge spanned the roadway. The devotees managed to stop the 35-foot high cart just before it reached the bridge. Although the parade appeared to have reached an unforeseen impasse, the chanting continued unabated. The previous year, the procession had taken this same route with a smaller cart, and even then, Syam Sundara had to climb up and saw off the spire. This year, however, Naranarayana had devised a collapsible dome with a crank to lower the canopy and superstructure. When Prabhupada had heard of these plans, he had asked, "Are you sure you want to depend on mechanical means? It could be a disaster." Now the time to lower the canopy had come and the crank wouldn't work. The um, the Kirtana had began. The devotees are pulling the carts, and it slowly moved forward, burning frankincense, and it poured aromatic clouds on the deities. Um, they are on the platform just above Prabhupada's head. And Prabhupada asked how many devotees have assembled. Tamal Krishna said 5,000. Then Prabhupada asked to change the chanting to Jai Jagannatha. Then they switched from Hare Krishna to Jai Jagannatha. And Prabhupada is watching the crowd. The crowd consisted of mostly young hippies and also businessmen who were dressed in suits and ties, and also elderly people, and there are also stray dogs. So the crowd was like a mixed Sunday crowd. And suddenly the devotees were calling to stop the cart because they were reaching the park bridge. The last year also they went on the same route, but this year the cart height is much greater, and now they have a collapsible dome. They can that was a mechanical way of lowering the canopy. And Prabhupada had expressed his um, opinion that that could be a disaster because you are depending on the mechanical means. And as he said, the crank wouldn't work and they couldn't lower the canopy.
That's interesting, isn't it? So I think you're inviting for dinner to everybody. Whoever we hear the whistle, pressure cooker whistle, we will go to their home for dinner. So I think it was coming from you. So basically everybody, devotees, everybody is invited to Prasanti's home, not dinner.
Sure, Prabhuji.
I was, I'm responsible for Philadelphia Chariot Rath Yatra, right? And I've been doing for many years. I'm responsible for the whole parade. So last year, this mechanical, we have three chariots, Jagannath, Baldev, and Subhadra. Last year, the whole dome of Jagannath chariot fell, boom. So basically, we almost majority of the Jagannath chariot canopy was came down. It happens. Always something happens. Just wanted to share. So I appreciate, thank you everyone for joining. We will continue tomorrow. Is that okay? Lenity. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Don't forget to go for dinner to Prasanti's house.